My siblings forged my signature to sell my grandfather's house, and they had no idea I could prove the notary who supposedly witnessed it doesn't exist. I found that out standing on the sidewalk outside his house, watching a moving truck I didn't recognize parked in the driveway. I stood there and watched two strangers carry my grandfather's armchair. The one he died in, 6 months earlier, the one none of us had touched since, out to a truck marked with a name I'd never heard of. My brother Dale was on the porch, holding a clipboard. Signing something for the movers like this was a completely normal Tuesday. "Dale," I said, "what is this?" He looked at me like I was the one interrupting something reasonable. "The house sold, Nora, closed yesterday. We split it 3 ways like we agreed." I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even known the house was listed. Dale slid a folded piece of paper across the porch, railing toward me. A copy of the closing documents, my name printed neatly at the bottom next to a signature that wasn't mine. What Dale and my sister Priya didn't know, standing in that driveway with a moving truck full of my grandfather's life, was that the signature at the bottom of that page had supposedly been notarized in a city I hadn't set foot in for 3 years. In front of a notary I had never once met in my life. They just closed on a house using a signature they forged, in front of a notarization that never happened. And neither of them had thought about the fact that a fake notary stamp leaves a much longer paper trail than a real one. My name is Nora. I'm 36, the middle of 3 kids, and if you'd asked anyone in my family to describe the sibling dynamic before all this, they'd have told you Dale handled money, Priya handled people, and I handled nothing really. That was the quiet, unspoken assumption. I lived 4 states away. I called on Sundays. I wasn't in the room for most of the decisions. My grandfather, Joseph, raised the 3 of us for a stretch in our teens, after our parents' divorce got messy enough that living with him was simply easier for everyone. He was the one constant through a genuinely unstable few years. The one who showed up to every school thing, who never once made any of us feel like an inconvenience, even when I know for a fact we were. When he got sick 2 years ago, Dale and Priya handled most of the day-to-day doctor's appointments, meal deliveries, the logistics of aging. I flew in when I could, called constantly, sent money for things they never mentioned needing. I've made peace with the fact that distance is an absence, and love doesn't require geography to count. Here's the part that matters, so hold on to it. About a week after Joseph's funeral, going through his old files with my brother, I noticed the deed to the house. A modest 3-bedroom place he'd owned outright for 40 years wasn't in the folder where his other paperwork was kept. I didn't think much of it at the time. Mostly out of habit from my own work in commercial contracts, I requested a certified copy from the county recorder's office, confirmed the 3 of us were listed as equal tenants in common per the will, and filed the copy away. Not because I suspected anything, just because that's how I'm wired. What I didn't think about, at the time, was something far more basic. Any future sale would legally require all 3 of our notarized signatures in front of an actual notary, verifying actual identification. That's the one part of a real estate closing specifically designed to prevent exactly what Dale and Priya were about to try. I had no idea, 6 months later, how much that single fact would end up mattering. For those 6 months, nobody mentioned selling the house. There was some vague talk at the funeral about eventually figuring out what to do with it, the kind of conversation families have and then quietly let drop. I called Dale periodically to check in. He mentioned once, in passing, that he and Priya had been looking into options for the property. I asked what that meant. He said, "Nothing concrete yet," and changed the subject to our mother's upcoming birthday. I believed him. I had no reason not to. What I didn't know, what I only pieced together weeks later, was that looking into options had, by that point, already become a signed listing agreement, a scheduled closing date, and a set of transfer documents that needed all 3 siblings' signatures. All 3, including mine, which is where the forgery came in. I'd driven up for what I thought was a routine visit to check on the house. The moving truck was the first sign something was wrong, but it wasn't the last thing that surprised me that afternoon. Dale's explanation came out fast and defensive in a way that told me he already knew how bad it sounded. We tried calling you about the listing, Nora. You were traveling for work, we couldn't get a hold of you for weeks, and the buyer's financing had a deadline. Priya said it'd be fine to just sign for you, since we all agreed on the split anyway. We never agreed on anything, I said. Nobody asked me if I wanted to sell. You've never even lived here in 15 years, Dale said, which I noticed wasn't actually a defense of what he'd done, just an attempt to make my objection feel unreasonable. We assumed you'd be fine with it. You always are. That phrase, you always are, landed harder than I expected. 15 years of being the easy sibling, the one who didn't need managing, apparently translated, in Dale's mind, into a standing permission slip to forge my name on a legal document. My phone buzzed. A text from Priya, who'd been watching this unfold from inside the house through the front window rather than come out and face it. Is he explaining it? We really did try calling you. It wasn't some big scheme. I typed back 2 words, "We'll see," and put the phone away. Priya finally came out onto the porch, arms crossed, doing the thing people do when they've decided the best defense is indignation. "This is insane, Nora. We're not criminals. We just wanted to move things along without dragging this out for another year." "Then why the rush?" I said. "The house sat there 6 months. What was one more if you just called me back?" That question is the one that cracked something. Priya rounded on Dale like she needed him to answer it for her. Tell her why we couldn't wait for the next closing window. Dale didn't tell her, so she told me instead. "He's had collectors calling the house for 4 months, Nora. Some business thing that went bad last year. He needed his third of this house now, not whenever you finally picked up your phone." Dale's jaw tightened. That has nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this," I said, and something in my chest went very still and very cold, the opposite of angry. This wasn't a scheduling problem. You weren't rushed because a buyer's financing had a deadline. You were rushed because you had a deadline. You knew exactly what forging my name would mean, and you did it anyway, because you needed the money before anyone slowed down enough to ask questions. Dale didn't answer that. He looked at the porch step like it owed him something. I want to be honest. Up to that point, some part of me had been holding room for the version where this was a clumsy, thoughtless shortcut 2 overwhelmed siblings talked themselves into. That room closed the second I understood Dale had known exactly what he was risking, and gambled my name on it anyway because his own timeline mattered more than my consent. Whatever calm I had left after that, I spent on purpose. "Dale," I said, calm, almost too calm, I could see it unsettling him more than yelling would have. "Who notarized my signature?" He hesitated. "I don't know. Some notary at the title company's office, probably. Standard stuff." "I've never been inside that title company's office," I said. "I've never met a notary in this state in my life. So whoever's stamp is on that page, under a signature that isn't mine, either notarized me without ever laying eyes on me, which is a crime for them too, or somebody used a stamp that isn't real at all." His face didn't change right away. It took a second, the specific delay of someone doing math they didn't expect to have to do. "That's not, the title company wouldn't have closed without proper notarization," he said, more to himself than to me. "They closed with something that looked like proper notarization," I said. "Notaries keep a journal, Dale. Every signing, dated, logged with an ID check. If a real notary's name is on that page, their journal is either going to show an entry for a woman who isn't me, or nothing at all for that day. Either way, there's about to be a record showing exactly who wasn't in that room. You forged my signature and faked a notarization on a property transfer," I said. "That's not moving things along. That's 2 separate felonies you're telling me you're not committing." Dale sat down on the porch step. Not dramatically, just sat, the way people do when their legs stop fully trusting the rest of the plan. Priya didn't say anything else. She looked at the moving truck, then at me, then back at the truck, like she was trying to figure out which direction actually made sense to look in anymore. One of the movers, a younger guy who'd clearly been half listening this whole time, quietly asked his coworker, low enough that he probably didn't think I'd hear it. Are we still getting paid for this load either way? Which was, in its own small way, the most honest reaction anyone had given all afternoon. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I told them both, plainly, that I'd be speaking with a real estate attorney before the end of the day, and that whatever happened next wasn't something I was interested in negotiating on a porch. Then I left. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the furniture get loaded. I met with a real estate attorney 2 days later, a woman named MS Aldridge, who specialized in exactly this kind of dispute. "Walk me through what you actually have," she said, "before I tell you what any of it means." So I did, the deed I'd pulled after the funeral, the closing documents with my forged name, the notary stamp I couldn't account for. She stopped me there. "You've never met a notary in this state." "Never." "Then one of two things is true," she said. "Either a real notary in this state is about to have a very bad conversation with a licensing board, or somebody used a stamp that was never legitimate to begin with. Notaries are required to keep a journal, every signing dated, logged with an ID check, and a thumbprint on a transaction this size. There's no version of this where that journal doesn't eventually tell us which one it is. And if it's the first one," I asked, "a real notary who just didn't check, then they're liable too. But either way, it stops being your word against your brother's. It becomes a paper trail against a paper trail." I told her I wasn't looking to send Dale to prison. I told her I mostly wanted the sale unwound, and some acknowledgement that this had actually happened. "That's your call," she said, "but you should know what you're holding because I don't think you fully do yet." She started counting on her fingers. 1, a forged signature. 2, a notarization that, one way or another, didn't happen the way the document claims. 3, she looked up. "Where were you on the closing date?" 4 states away, work meetings on a calendar with witnesses. I flew back the next week. So 3, a documented alibi. Flight records, meeting logs, your phone pinging cell towers nowhere near that title office. She set her pen down. "That's not a swearing match anymore, Nora. That's a case a forensic document examiner can confirm in about a day, sitting on top of a notary journal that's either going to back you up or expose itself as fake. You didn't build that leverage. Your brother built it for you, the moment he decided to forge a signature, without thinking through how many other people's paperwork he'd have to fake along with it. What happens to the house, to the people who bought it? Once the title company learns a signing was fraudulent, they move fast. They insured a transaction on a document that's invalid, and that's their exposure, not yours. The sale becomes voidable. The buyer, who did nothing wrong here, gets made whole through the title insurance policy your brother's side paid for at closing. What's left over after that? The house, the 3 of you, that part's yours to decide." The next 6 weeks were less dramatic than the porch scene, but more consequential. The title company, once informed, moved fast to protect their own exposure. The sale was voided, the buyer was refunded through the title insurance policy, and Joseph's house, at least on paper, reverted to the 3 of us as it should have been from the start. Dale and Priya, through their own attorney, offered a settlement rather than risk a criminal referral, a formal notarized agreement acknowledging the forgery, along with a revised plan for the house requiring all 3 of our actual, verified signatures for anything going forward. I agreed to it. I meant what I told MS Aldridge. I didn't want my brother in prison. I wanted to never again be the sibling whose name got used without her actual consent. Dale called me 3 weeks into that process, the first real conversation we'd had since the driveway. He didn't fully apologize. There was a lot of "I know how it looked," and not much else, until I asked him directly why he hadn't just told me about the debt instead of forging my name. He said, quietly, that admitting he needed the money that badly felt worse than the forgery did in the moment. I told him that's precisely the kind of thinking that turns a shortcut into a felony, and he didn't have much of an answer for that. Priya and I talked less. She sent one message, weeks later, that read more like a justification than an apology, something about how she'd always felt like the sibling who did the real work, while I got to just show up occasionally and still get an equal share. I told her that resentment she'd never voiced wasn't a legal defense, and that if she genuinely felt the split was unfair, the conversation to have was with me directly, years ago, not a forged signature after the fact. It's been about 4 months since the driveway. The house is back in all 3 of our names, this time with an actual agreement in place. Any future decision about selling it requires all 3 of us to sign in person, in front of a notary, no exceptions, no assumptions about what anyone would obviously be fine with. Dale and I talk occasionally now, carefully. Priya and I are, at best, cordial. I've made peace with the possibility that it might not become more than that. The house itself is still sitting there, unsold, exactly as it was before any of this happened, Joseph's armchair back in its place. Since the movers, once everything unwound, brought everything back rather than keep driving toward a sale that no longer legally existed. I drove by it once, a few weeks ago, just to see it. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car for a few minutes, thinking about a man who spent 40 years making sure that house was solid, steady, paid for outright. The kind of asset that was never supposed to become a weapon 3 siblings used against each other. I don't think Dale or Priya are fundamentally bad people. I think one of them made a decision under real financial desperation, and the other went along with it, and both of them told themselves it was a technicality rather than a crime. The kind of shortcut that only reveals its actual weight once someone stops it from working. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. The safeguards built into the boring parts of the system, notary logs, ID checks, the paperwork nobody thinks about until they need it, exist for exactly this reason. Not because you expect your family to betray you, but because the version of events that holds up isn't the one people remember more confidently. It's the one a stranger with a stamp, and a logbook was required, by law, to verify actually happened. Tell me in the comments, once you found out it was about Dale's debt, not just convenience, did that change how you'd have handled it?